So let's say we want to add some relative frequencies to our frequency distribution. A relative frequency, as I just mentioned, is a percentage or a proportion. And so I'm going to write up here the equation to get a percentage, and we'll be using that to fill in this table. This also appears on the PowerPoint slide. It'll pop up when we head back over there. So to find a relative frequency, or a percent, we can take our frequency for a particular category, so frequency like 4, divide by the total number of observations, in this case 12, and then multiply it times 100. So what we can do here to add relative frequencies to our table is apply this formula to each of these different frequencies that we have. So for our first one here, we can say that for our relative frequency, we're going to take our frequency of 4. So there's our RF is 4. Our total number of observations of 12. So double check over here. 12 is our total number of observations. And then take this fraction and multiply it times 100. If we do this, we get about 0.33 times 100, and that equals about 33%. So we can now add this number to our frequency table. And we can interpret this by saying that in our data set where we have different numbers of arrests that people have experienced, about 33% of the people in our sample had experienced 0 arrests. We can do the same thing for each of these other numbers. So for our frequency of 3, so we've got 1 arrest has a frequency of 3, again because 1 appears 3 times. We can take that frequency of 3 and plug it in here for the numerator in this fraction. Divide by the total number of observations. This will be the same each time because we still have 12 people who we have data for. Multiply times 100. And if we do this, you get 0.25 times 100, and that equals 25%. So we can fill this into our table and say that 25% of people in our sample here had been arrested 1 time. And we can do this down the line. I won't go through each of these here, but you can check the calculations if you want from home. But for a frequency of 2, we end up with about 17%. For a frequency of 1, we end up at about 8%. And then this frequency of 2 again will once again be about 17%. You can always double check your relative frequencies. They should add up to 100%, give or take a percentage point or so on either side, depending on how you rounded them off. And now we've added relative frequencies to this table. So again, this is with an eye towards making it even easier to get useful information out of this data at a glance. And now instead of trying to have to make sense of how much more is 4 than 2 or 1 given what our total sample size is, we can say really quickly, about 33% of our sample had been arrested 0 times, about 17% of our sample had been arrested 4 times, and we could do the same thing for whatever number we might be interested in. So now I'll head back over to the slides, show some examples of relative frequencies from the class data, and talk about a couple other things we can do with our frequency tables.